So today we are going to talk about strategic bottom-up planning. You are building from the ground up. And this is a three-part video series for CFOs and financial leadership and executive leadership. It's a companion to the top-down planning series that I earlier shared. In this particular session, we're going to talk about the power of bottom-up planning and the CFO's role in that. So welcome. I'm happy you're here. In our top-down planning series, I talked about setting strategic frames and ambitious targets. But today, we're going to talk about the other critical half of planning, and that is bottom-up planning. And I want to start by saying something very important. Bottom-up planning is not the enemy of top-down planning. They are complementary. And they are complementary approaches that need to work together. And here's what I've observed. CFOs often treat bottom-up planning as an obstacle to overcome or a formality to get through on the way to the real plan. So they ask the function leaders for bottom-up inputs and then essentially ignore them and push the top-down targets anyway. And you know what this does? It creates resentment, it destroys trust and leads to plans that nobody really commits to. They have not believed, they have not bought into the plan yet. The right approach is to treat bottom-up planning as essential ground truth that informs and validates your top-down strategic targets. Your function leaders are closest to the operational realities. They understand the constraints. They understand the opportunities. They understand what is actually achievable better than anyone in the finance team. And if you don't listen to them with genuine empathy and curiosity, you will build plans that look good on paper but fail in execution. Let me give you a personal example. I was working with a company where the top-down target was 80% revenue growth. And the head of sales has submitted a bottom-up plan of 45% growth. So the CFO's first instinct was to push back. That's not acceptable. We need 80%. But I said, let's stop and really understand why sales thinks 45% is the ceiling. Let's approach this with empathy and curiosity, not skepticism and pressure. We spent 3 hours with the head of sales. And we went through the bottom-up plan that he provided in detail. He asked for current sales capacity. We questioned him about that. Historical productivity by rep cohort, time to ramp new hires, pipeline coverage ratios, win rates by segment, seasonal patterns, the state of the market. What became clear was that the 45% wasn't sandbagging. It was actually a very thoughtful, data-driven assessment based on capacity constraints and realistic assumptions. It was not something that the salesperson threw out at me. But here's also what became clear, that there were opportunities hidden in the plan. The sales were, they were assuming productivity would stay flat, but we could see opportunities to improve through better enablement. They were assuming average deal size which would stay constant, but they were pricing and packaging opportunities. They were planning for conservative hiring timelines, but we could accelerate if we made recruiting a higher priority. By approaching the bottom-up plan with more of empathy and curiosity rather than judgment, we found a path from 45 to 65% growth that sales started to actually believe in. Yeah, we didn't get to the 80%, but we got a far closer look at reality. We would have just been imposing a target which was not probably real. So here's a framework I use for effective bottom-up planning. Principle 1, of the framework. Start with empathy and understanding. This rooted in the planning process. When function leaders submit bottom-up plans that fall short of top-down targets, your first instinct should be curiosity, not criticism. Help me understand your thinking. What are you seeing on the ground? What constraints are you working with? What are you most worried about? And I've observed that when CFOs approach the bottom-up planning with genuine empathy, with curiosity, the function leaders, they start opening up about their real challenges and opportunities. They share information they wouldn't share if they felt defensive. And you know what? You get much of a richer understanding of what is actually possible. Principle 2, understand the justification deeply. Don't just look at the headline numbers. Look, and when I say headline numbers, don't look at headcount requests and budget asks. Dig into the justification. Why do you need these resources? What will they enable? What happens if you don't get them? What is the ROI? And I facilitate this by creating a structured template for bottom-up submissions that forces very clear justification. So for every resource request, you know what I do? What specific outcome will this enable? That's the question. What is the expected return or impact? What is the phasing of cost versus benefit? What happens if we defer this investment by a few more months? This is not about bureaucracy, it's just helping the function leaders think rigorously about their requests and giving finance the information needed to make good trade-off decisions. Principle 3, you validate your assumptions with data. We just talked about the assumptions, but you validate that with data. Look at the bottom-up plans, which rest on assumptions about productivity, about conversion, pricing, retention, and dozens of other variables. Your job is to help validate these assumptions, not just accept them or reject them. So here's how I do this. Sales, you're planning what? 25 new reps? And each of them generating 550K each in the first year? Our historical average, by the way, is about 420K. What is driving your assumption of higher productivity? Are you planning on maybe different hiring profiles or better territories or improved enablement or focusing on a particular segment? If they have good answers backed by data or specific plans, that's great. Include that in the model. If they're being very optimistic and there's no justification, push back and push back gently. I want to support the plan, but I need to see evidence that the 550K is achievable. What are the underlying assumptions in your model, in your thinking? Can we either plan with historical averages or build a specific initiative to drive productivity improvement to get you there? You are helping them to build and think about a rigorous plan, not just challenging them. Principle 4 is about looking for operational improvements buried in the bottom-up plan. I've observed that most bottom-up plans assume the current performance levels and that will continue forever. But there's almost always opportunity to improve efficiency. There's always opportunity to increase productivity or optimize resource allocation. And that is the CFO's job. His job is to work with functional leaders to find these opportunities. Not to impose them, but to collaboratively identify them. Marketing, you're planning to spend $3 million to generate 10,000 MQLs. That's awesome. That's $300 per MQL. Last quarter, your best performing channel delivered MQLs at $180. What would it take to shift more budget toward that channel, that economics? Maybe could we get the 10,000 MQLs with $2.5 million maybe, if you optimize the channel mix? When you help functional leaders find inefficiencies and improvements, you're adding value rather than just cutting costs. And they're much more likely to commit to the improved plan because they help build it. Principle 5, you have to connect the bottom-up plans to top-down strategic objectives. This is where the two planning approaches, they come together. You help functional leaders, they see how their bottom-up plan connects to the company's strategic priorities. I do this explicitly. Here's your top-down strategic objective. Establish your market leadership in the enterprise segment, let's say. Sales, your bottom-up plan, has most new hiring in mid-market. Help me understand how that aligns with the strategic vision again. Should we be shifting maybe some hiring toward the enterprise, even if it means fewer total reps because of the higher costs? This is not about a gotcha moment. It's about ensuring that the alignment between what functional leaders are planning and where the company is trying to go, they strategically are together. Let me share what I've learned about the CFO's role in bottom-up planning. You are not a judge. You don't take on the role of a judge evaluating submissions and giving, thumbs up or thumbs down. You're not doing that. You're a collaborative partner. You're a facilitator. You're helping the functional leaders build the best possible plans, rigorous, credible, achievable, aligned with the strategy, and optimized for company's value creation. So this requires a different mindset that many CFOs bring to planning. It requires slowing down and really, really listening. It requires empathy for the challenges that the functional leaders they face. It requires seeing your job as helping them succeed, not as protecting the company from their resource requests. So in the top-down planning series, I talked about establishing those ambitious targets and creating the strategic frames. And in this bottom-up planning series, we're talking about the complementary work of understanding the operational reality, validating what is achievable maybe, and collaborating, building plans that bridge the gap between the strategic ambition and the operational capacity. So in the next video, we'll get into the details of evaluating expenses and investments. I'll show you how to assess which resource requests are essential versus what is discretionary, and how do you calculate ROI on functional investments. and how to make smart trade-offs. Smart trade-offs when you cannot fund everything that is requested. So I look forward to seeing you in the next session. Take care. Bye-bye.